So you remember back to 2009, just 5 or 6 years ago, there was no iPad. Today, there's more tablets sold than PCs. My kids use them. My 95-year-old grandma uses them. But I'd put forth that ubiquity hasn't quite been achieved in digital healthcare. Yet digital healthcare began maybe around the same time, and I'll talk about that in a second. And maybe that's an unfair comparison, but I oftentimes get asked the question, Chris, where are we in the life cycle of digital healthcare? And I think it's a very important question, and I would put forth that you could look at it as the last 5 years was all about ideas, great ideas for digital health. The next 5 years, we need to begin to scale some of those great ideas. And then the 5 years after that, that's the promised land. Might be a little overstating it, but let's be real optimistic. So what do I mean by 5 years ago is sort of when digital health began and the ideas that began to be created? Well, according to Google Trends, the term mHealth didn't even exist back in 2009. And I can remember those days writing press releases, wondering what to call it. And our favorite news outlet, Moby Health News, didn't exist. But thanks to them and the entrepreneurs that got started early, and Dr. Collins at the NIH, who embraced digital health very early and thought that it could be a huge part of healthcare and research, and created the mHealth conference on the East Coast, and people like Jill, who really drove things on the West Coast. We now have dozens of countries and thousands of people coming together. So that was the time of the Wild West. It was passionate entrepreneurs coming up with ideas, learning, failing fast, trying things. There was literally oftentimes no laws, certainly chaos. It's exactly how it should have been at that moment in time. And I hope that continues. But they say if you're 5 years ahead of everyone, you're a lunatic. If you're 5 minutes ahead of everyone, you're a genius. And I think we're getting much closer to that 5-minute period. So let's talk about why. So what's happened over those last 5 years that are going to allow us to move into a moment of scaling? I think we should touch on some of these topics. So starting with technology. Look where we've come in 5 years, just a visual representation. On the left, one of the leading cell phones sold in 2009. On the right, as you all know, one of the leading phones sold today. Not only do they look good on the outside, but on the inside, dramatically different. This is a personal, powerful computer that allows digital health to do things that it couldn't have done 5 years ago. And the ubiquity of it, it's now in everyone's pocket. And that's just on the hardware side. On the software side, maybe another good example to depict what's changed. 1 billion applications downloaded 5 years ago. Today, 100 billion and growing. This is an exponential growth rate. So this is outside of digital health. The technology world has changed dramatically. And it's going to allow us to do things that we haven't been able to do 5 years ago. And even in healthcare, technology has changed. The adoption of, say, EMRs has gone from very low to the majority of people having them and using them. And more importantly, the attitude within the healthcare field of technology has become one where most people believe that it is a potential enabler. Some people are beginning to believe that it is a requirement for practicing good medicine in the future. And it just really wasn't an attitude that existed more than 5 years ago. So that's been a big change. They also say that time is one of the greatest determinants of the success of a startup. And so timing is very important. And if you look at the reimbursement landscape or the economic landscape, timing is much better today than it was 5 years ago. CMS has committed to having 50% of their payments in an alternate model by 2018. Whether they get there or not, we know the direction of where things are headed. In situations where they've implemented bundle payments, I can tell you firsthand, people are responding and saying, we need things like digital health to be able to operate in that environment in an efficient, effective way to deliver the value and the quality that we're now getting paid for. And the regulatory landscape, back in the Wild West, literally just a year or two ago, completely unclear as to what needs to be done. I remember when we were going through our first filing, the FDA saying, I think you need to submit one for every single phone that you work on. So we've come a long way, and huge kudos to the FDA, to Bakul Patel, and others that have embraced digital health, that are working closely with the startups and now with the large companies. And this is important because large companies do not enter spaces where the regulatory pathway is unclear. They just don't. So this is a big milestone that we've now begun to de-risk it and show a pathway that people can operate in and is investable. And speaking of investment, as you heard earlier today, we've gone from almost nothing 5 years ago to 4 or 5 billion a year today. I remember we had to raise 35 million in angel capital at WellDoc 5 years ago. That's one check at a time, because you go to the VCs and they said, oh, your medical device over here. Oh, wait, your technology over here. And they weren't working together, and they couldn't understand digital health. And thankfully, it changed very quickly, and it's a very different environment today. And we're seeing things that work. They're either generating outcomes or money or usage and adoption or all of the above. But it's not a foregone conclusion. I put this together a week ago, and someone up here has already closed up shop. So things are changing fast. So if that was sort of the last 5 years, where are we headed over the next 5 years around scaling these solutions? If we've taken risk out, if we've proven that some of these work, if we've taken them as far as we can with small amounts of capital and small infrastructures, we're going to need large companies to come in and work and partner with some of the smaller companies. And thankfully, we're seeing that. We're seeing massive companies coming into the space. Surprisingly or not, non-healthcare companies seem to be moving in even quicker. I think it's phenomenal. They're going to bring a perspective that's different than your traditional healthcare companies would bring to the table. But I can tell you firsthand that the healthcare companies are right behind on their coattails, and some of them certainly have been ahead of the curve, like Walgreens, who I think developed what I would call one of the largest and so far most successful horizontal digital health platforms. 7 million people and growing coming to use this every week. And why that's important is if you have a horizontal platform, then verticals can plug into that. And I think this sort of depicts what I'm saying. I think 2015 was the year really of establishing platforms, such as Apple Health and Apple Research Kit and Samsung S Health and Walgreens and IBM Watson. And those are really important because it allows verticals like diabetes and orthopedics and cardiac to plug into them to make their solutions better and to achieve scale and distribution that they couldn't otherwise on their own. And for those of you in the big companies with platforms or in the small companies with solutions, it's really important that you know who you want to be and how you want to intersect at that particular moment. Otherwise, it's difficult to work together. If that was 15, I think 2016 is the year of the CEO. And what I mean by that, and in my new job, I have this really lucky position of working with the CEOs of most of the very large healthcare companies, and I'm seeing something I haven't seen before. It was largely these skunkworks teams that were focused on digital healthcare. Now we're at the C-suite, and they're saying, I get it, we have to do digital health. Now, I have no idea what that means, but here's a budget, these people are in charge of it, and I want to plan, in 6 months, and then I want to start implementing it. I don't want to be behind the 8 ball. And we want to move to where we're taking advantage of it rather than being disadvantaged by digital healthcare. And so you're going to see that throughout 2016. A lot of that's going to be behind the scenes. But then the fruits of that will play out in 2017 with more acquisitions and roll-ups and partnerships and IPOs. So we've begun to see some of these, but we're going to move into the higher part of the bell curve soon. I'm working with companies where we're looking at rolling up 6 or 7 or 8 digital health startups because they all have a piece of the puzzle that we need to put together. So that was the first 5 years, then coming 5 years, and then the next 5 years. This is the promised land, as we hope. We'll see things that are scaled, that are working, and then we can begin to scale them around the world, adapting language, culture, clinical algorithms, meeting the regulatory requirements of each particular country, and really achieving a healthier future for our world, which is why we're all here. Thanks for your time. We're hiring. I hope to hear from you. Thanks.